Today we will talk about chapter 6. It is about chapter 13 and your IGCSE straight line equation. So let's look at the multiple choice together. So this question 1 is very similar to the one we did last time. They give you 4 graphs and it asks you about which one will represent this graph of x minus y equals k. So you can see that all of those graphs is a straight line. So you know we're talking about straight line equations. So straight line equations, and therefore you will think about y equals mx plus c. So in this case here, the first step we have to do is change this equation in the form of y equals mx plus c. So y minus x minus y equals k. And we rearrange it, move the x to the other side, we'll have negative x plus k, and we have to move the negative sign to the other side as well because you can see that it is y on the left hand side only. So when we change the negative sign to the right hand side, we'll have positive x minus k. So where's the m? You might ask where's the m. So in this case, your gradient m has to be a value of 1 because we don't write the value of 1. So in this case, you know that your m is 1, and because it is a positive x, you know that m is also a positive number. So if your m, the gradient, is a positive number, it means that your gradient is positive. So therefore, we're looking for a positive slope. And in this case, if we go from this way to this way, it's a positive. If we go from this way to this way, it's a negative slope. So therefore, your C and D is a negative slope, and it can't be the answer. It's just the A and B. So let's look at A and B. So apart from looking at the slope, the gradient, we will now look at the y-intercept. So in this case, you know that C is negative k. So does it mean that you have a negative y-intercept? No, because it tells you that your k is a negative number. So for k to be a negative number, so here is a negative, and you got a negative sign. So negative will give you positive. So therefore, your C is a positive number. So your y-intercept should be here, which is a positive number, and therefore your answer is A. So in the second question, they say straight line L1 passes through the point A and cuts the x-axis as point B. So you got informations of that for your line 1, and then line 2, you got this information. It passes through point B and D. So now it says if they are parallel. So what do you know about parallel? You know that your slope L1 will be equal to your slope L2. So let's look at it. So for L1, you got these 2 points. So you have to find the slope using the slope formula. So remember your slope formula equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this part, some of you still get it wrong sometimes. So for the slope of L1, we got, so I use point B maybe. So the y-intercept of point B is 0, and then minus the one in A, so you got this, and then we start with point B as well. The x-coordinate is 2, and then you minus this one here is A, so you got minus 2 over 2 minus A. This is your slope of L1, and then slope of L2. So L2, you got 2 points here and no unknowns, so you should be able to find a number for that. So let's look at this part here. So C, y coordinate of C minus y coordinate of D over x coordinate of C minus x coordinate of D. So in this case here, you have 4 over minus 8, which is minus 1 over 2. And because it is parallel, we said that the slope should be equal. So here we can put it together. So we will use the cross here. So we times it up here, times it up here. So we will have 4 equals 2 minus 8. The negative sign just times it out together. And after that, you should have a minus a equals 4 minus 2. And therefore, your a is minus 2. So your answer should be A. So always look at the information part by part. Then you can use the informations separately and then combine together. So you can see I highlight them. So it's easier for you to look at it. So number 3. So if your line here and it says it's parallel. Again, parallel, what do you know about parallel? So you know that the slope of, I don't know, give it a name, line 1 maybe. So this 1, this is 2, must be equals to the slope of the line 2. So let's look at it. So this one is already in the form of y equals mx plus c, so this one will be the slope. And this one, it is not in the form of y equals mx plus c, so we have to rearrange it first. So to rearrange it, we swap the x over a to the other side, and then we still have a b under the y. So remember, we want it to be y equals mx plus c. So your left hand side can only have y there. So therefore, here y equals b minus b over a times x. And just to make it in the form of mx plus c, so easier to look at. So here, because it is parallel, m1 supposed to be equals m2, so here is your m from the line 1, and then the line 2, this is my m, so m1 equals m2 will give you that minus b over a, so which is your D. So you have the answer for your question 3, which is D. And after that, question 4, it says this is collinear. So therefore, they're asking for K. So this free slope, this free line, these 3 points, if they are collinear, so if we find the slope, it should be equals to each other because they are on the same line. So in this case, I will find the slope of this 2 point here. So minus 2, minus 0, the y coordinate is on top, and then in the same order, x coordinate at the bottom. And the other side, it doesn't matter which 2 combination you put, but it's easier if I just have one side with the unknown. So here, the y coordinate of these 2 points I'm doing for the right hand side, because it's collinear, so the slope is equal, so I just put an equal sign here. So the y coordinate minus 2, minus 4, and then the x coordinate minus each other. So you got this. So now you just have to solve it. So on the left hand side, you have minus 2, minus 4, minus k equals minus 6 over minus 9. So the negative sign, we can get rid of the negative sign first if you don't want it. So you know that it is 2 over 4 plus k equals 6 over 9. Or if you don't want, you can just cross times it immediately. So minus 2 minus 9 equals minus 6 times minus 4 minus k. So 2 times 9 is 18. 24 plus 6k. So minus 6 equals 6k, and therefore your k equals minus 1. So in this case, when you look at your choice, you will see that k is minus 1, so therefore your answer is B. So here you got 3 straight line. 1, 2, 3. And they're asking which of the followings are true. So you can see that in here, what they gave you is parallel, parallel, and perpendicular. So parallel meaning that you have to find whether your M1 equals M2 or your M2 equals M3. And if it's perpendicular, it means that M1 times M3 equals minus 1. Are these true? So in this case, we have to change them into all into the format of y equals mx plus c first, because we only want to look at your gradient, the m. So in this case here, let's look at this. The first one, we have to rearrange it. So 6x plus 4y minus 3 equals 0. So rearrange it, I just want my y on the left hand side. So divided by 4. So this is my first one, this is L1. And L2, you can look at it, it is already in the form of y equals mx plus c, so I don't have to do anything. And we just look at L3 then. L3. So again, you have to rearrange it a little bit. So leave my y on the left hand side. So now just look at the gradient. So here, this is the gradient for each of the line. So let's look at it quickly. So is M1 equals to M2? So we have negative 3 over 2 for L2. And this one, actually you can simplify it to negative 3 over 2 as well, 6 over 4, because, so therefore, this one is correct because they equals. And then let's look at L2 and L3. L3, this one, if we simplify it, it's 3 over 2, but L2, you got a negative sign here. So it's not the same, so this one is wrong. So L1, you have negative 3 over 2, and then times L3, the gradient. So let's see if it is equals to negative 1. But when you times it, you realize it is negative 9 over 4. So it's not equals to negative 1, so it's not correct as well. And therefore, the answer for this one is just A. Only number 1 is correct. So last one, we see this here a lot. So we just have to look at them carefully. So L2 and L1, you can see that they are positive gradient. And then this part here, L3 and L4, you can see that the way they draw it, it is a negative gradient. So look at the size of it. If we look at it carefully, so let's look at the positive gradient first. We know that for the positive gradient, the steeper it is, the greater m it's got. So therefore, you know that m2 has to be greater than m1 because L2 is steeper. But for the negative gradient, the steeper one, okay, in size, because there's a negative sign in front of the number, So this L3 here is actually smaller than L4, even though it looks steeper. The values of M3 is smaller than M4. So M4 is greater than M3. And of course, the negative gradient is always smaller than the positive gradient. So when we look at what we write and compare to the choice, you can see that D is your answer here. So this is all about the multiple choice. So let's go to the long questions now. So this question here. So a lot of you always got messed up at choosing the points to find the gradient. So question part A, it asks you for the gradient, and the best point to choose is where it crossed the y-intercept and where it crossed the x-intercept, because the question when we design it, the teacher make it usually the point that cross the x-axis and y-axis is exact number. So some of you choose this here. This point here is not even on anywhere. It's very hard to look at because it is something in between your 5 and your 6. And some of you choose this point here, but you can see that there's actually a tiny gap if you zoom in a little bit. And in the paper, you can definitely see that it is not at the corner of that square. So therefore, when you ask for the gradient, choose the point that cross your x-axis and your y-axis. So your x-axis and your y-axis here. So now let's look at it. This is a 2. So this is a 4. And therefore, this point here is 0, 3. And this is -4, -6. So this point here has to be -5. So therefore, your part A, gradient equals, remember gradient is just the slope, so it doesn't matter how you call it, but remember it is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So in this case here, it is 0 minus 3 from this point, 0 minus 3, and then -5 minus 0. So your answer should be, so make sure you do it carefully with your calculations, especially the negative sign. Some of you always got mistakes on it. So you have your slope as your gradient as 3 over 5 for this line L. So gradient of line L. You can also write it out easily for you to see. And then it asks you to write the equation. So it only 1 mark. So let's look at this. It gives you the grid, the graph, it draws out already, and the equation, you know, when they ask for equation, they are looking for y equals mx plus c. And in this case here, you have your gradient from part A, and your c will just be your y-intercept. So by looking at this here, your y-intercept is 3, and therefore it is y equals the gradient from your part A, you write it down, and then plus your y-intercept, which is 3. So you don't need any steps at all. So part C, find the equations of the straight line that is parallel to L. So let's use another color. Parallel to L. When you know it's parallel, it means what? It means your gradient is the same. So gradient is the same, so therefore this is your gradient. And there's another information, it passed through this point here. So now, first of all, you have to find a new intercepts, new y-intercepts for this equation. So which means you have to find a new c. So the point is, the first thing, you can write down these equations of the straight line, the gradient of the equation of straight line equals 3 over 5. If you don't want to write that much, all you have to do is, so just write because they are parallel. So therefore, gradient of straight line, you can just use some SL to represent your straight line, is equals to your gradient of L, which is 3 over 5. And because it passed through the point minus 10, minus 2, so when your y equals minus 2, your x equals minus 10, using the formula of y equals mx plus c, you plug in the numbers just. So negative 2 equals your m is 3 over 5 times your x plus c. And then you can solve it to find your c. So in this case here, negative 2 equals, solve it, and your c should be 4. But this is not finished, so you have to write down, therefore, y equals 3 over 5 x plus 4. So this is your final answer. So make sure you write this final step. So let's look at question 8. So question 8. So part A, it gives you some information again. So find the equation of straight line that pass through the point 6,5 and perpendicular to this. So perpendicular, what do you know about perpendicular? So it means that two slopes times together give you -1. So before that, this one here, we don't know what is the slope of it, because it is not in the form of y equals mx plus c. So what do? We rearrange it. Put your y on the left hand side. Make sure I only want the y, so therefore you have to divide the 3 to the other side. And you will have this equation. So the slope, let's use gradient. So gradient, so again, gradient and slope is the same thing, just IGCSE question, they like to use the word gradient. So gradient is -2 over 3 in this case. And then there's this straight line here. It passed through this point and is perpendicular to this equation. So therefore, you know that because they are perpendicular, so you don't need to name them because there's just two lines, so just use they is fine. So therefore, your straight line of the gradient will be equals to, times this -2 over 3 will be equals to -1. So because it's perpendicular, two gradient times together give you -1. So then you will have your straight line gradient and it will be 3 over 2. But it's not done yet because they ask you to what? They ask you to find the equation of the straight line. So therefore, you have to write when y, because they give you this point, when y equals 5, x equals 6. Again, we are finding the c, the value of c. So put it in the form of y equals mx plus c now. So y is 5, your gradient is 3 over 2, and your x is 6, and find a c. So c is -4, so therefore it is y equals 3 over 2x minus 4. So this is your final answer. So that is part A. So always turn it to the format of y equals mx plus c, remember. So now let's look at part B. So part B, find the intersection of the point. So here, the point of intersection. So when you look at intersections, it means that they want you to use simultaneous equation. This concept you actually have learned it in Form 2 already. So here you got two equations. So in this case here, solve them simultaneously. And you can actually use equation 2. Some of you choose equation 1, but equation 2 looks more simple. So just rearrange it a little bit so that your x is the subject, and please name this new equation number 3. So in this case, you got a new equation. Just substitute it. I'm using the substitute methods now. So sub number 3 into number 1. So it comes from number 2. Don't put it back to number 2. You'll get nothing. So put it back into number 1. So 2, whenever it's a x, you have to change it now. So 2 times 6 minus 4y plus 3y plus 3 equals 0. So you can see that there's only y as an unknown in your equation. So you're just solving it with one unknown. So 12 minus 8y plus 3y plus 3 equals 0. Minus 8y plus 3y equals minus 12 minus 3. So minus 5y equals minus 15. So your y is 3. So when you got y, sub y equals 3 back into equation 3. So we choose, it doesn't matter which one you choose, but you can see that equation 3, your left hand side is already x. So it's easier for you to solve it. So your y is 3. So x equals 6 minus 12. And therefore your x is minus 6. So therefore, point of intersection is minus 6 and 3. So this is your answer for part B. So part B, you have to use simultaneous equation. It doesn't matter you use eliminations method or substitution methods. Both are fine as long as you have your calculations correct. So then it comes to question 9, your last question. So question 9, this type of questions, when you see it, you know they are not the IGCSE straight line equations type. So this is your chapter 13. So let's look at it. So M is the midpoint of AC. You got the information of this part. I'm only talking about this part because I already jumped to part A and see what they asked first. They're asking for the coordinate of C and M. So look for the information you got about your M and C. So M is the midpoint of AC. And some of you might say, there is nothing on the graph. Yes, because the information is here. So we can actually draw it out first. So your point A is this. Your point B is this. So just write out. So we don't have coordinate of C and M because it's not given. But if you look at it, you either look at the wordings, or if not, you look at your graph, you can see that M and C. M is lying on the x-axis and C is lying on the y-axis. So therefore, you know something about them as well. Your M, because it is on the x-axis, so you know that your y has to be 0. And your C here, because this is on the y-axis, so their x coordinate is 0, and we have the y coordinate. So now we can look at it. It asks you for the coordinate C and M. and you have this information here, so we only have to focus on this information, midpoint. So we have to think about your midpoint formula. So part A, so for midpoint formula and your section formula, the ratios one, you actually only need to consider the x-coordinate and y-coordinate. So consider the x-coordinate. So the midpoint is m, so the x-coordinate of m is x. And for the midpoint formula, it is your x plus x divided by 2 and your y plus y divided by 2 if you're using the coordinate form. So in this case here, when we only look at the x-coordinate, we only need to look at this part. So in this case, it is 8 plus 0 divided by 2. And therefore, your x-coordinate will be 8 over 2 equals 4. So the coordinates of m is 4, 0. And then after that, we consider the y-coordinate. So when we look at the y-coordinate, your m is the midpoint and the y-coordinate of m is 0. 0 is equals to 2 plus y divided by 2. So in this case here, 0 equals 2 plus y, and therefore your y is negative 2. So coordinate of C is 0, negative 2. When they ask for the coordinates, make sure you write this in a pair. So you have to make sure you write this and this for the final answer. So just resize this a little bit. And then the next part, it asks you to determine whether it is perpendicular. So when you look at perpendicular, you immediately think of, use another color, gradient of BM times gradient of AC. It is equals to negative 1. So it asks you to determine. So it means that you have to decide whether it is perpendicular or not. So please don't write that immediately as the statement. So you have to find the slope of part B, slope of BM, and then your slope of AC. So slope of BM. So we got the coordinate of B, we got the coordinate of M, so it's just 7 minus 0 and over 0 minus 4 equals 7 over minus 4. And then for AC, you got 2 minus 2 and your 8 minus 0. So remember the negative sign here. Some of you always forgot about it. So it's 4 over 8, and therefore you got 1 over 2. So because you times them together, because when you times slope of BM and slope of AC, it doesn't equals to negative 1. So therefore, BM is not perpendicular to AC. So this is the answer for part B. So let's look at part C now. So part C here. It says D is a point lying on BM such that DA is parallel to the x-axis, and find the ratio. So when you see find the ratio, you can think of your section formula already. So here you can see that you don't have D in your graph. So let's read the question carefully. D is a point lying on BM, so it's somewhere on top of this line here. And it says DA is parallel to x-axis. So in this case here, we know that the D is here. And because it's parallel to x-axis, so it means that D and point A is on the same height. So when we say they're on the same height, you don't need to do any calculation at all. You can already say that D has coordinates, y coordinates, same as your point A, which is 2. Right, nicely. So here, so when we do that, we can consider the y coordinate only. We don't really need to find the x coordinate of D. Because section formula, we can consider the y coordinate of D. So we only need to consider the D, and also we have to let BD to DM be 1 to R. So after we let this, actually let me move this part somewhere. So this case here, we just have to remember the formula. So the point D, the y coordinate is 2, and then we have the coordinates times the ratios. Sorry, write this the other way. So the coordinate times the ratio plus the coordinate times the ratio divided by the sum of the ratio, and you have 2 times 1 plus r equals 0 plus 7r. So you got 2 plus 2r equals 7r. So 2 equals 5r, and r equals 2 over 5. So when I say r equals 2 over 5, it means that so always put it back into the form like this. So we times it, so it's 5 to 2. So therefore the ratio of BD to DM is 5 to 2. So this is your final answer of this question. And this is the last questions of this chapter test. So remember, make sure for the straight line equations questions, they always ask like this. So make sure you look at the information they give you carefully.